The Ministry of Foreign Affairs, European Union and Cooperation is a department of the Government of Spain in charge of planning, managing, carrying out and evaluating the country's foreign policy and the international cooperation for development policy, paying special attention to the ones in relation to the European Union and Ibero-America, as well as coordinating and supervising all actions done in this areas by the other ministries in public administrations. Likewise, it is responsible for promoting international economic, cultural and scientific relationships, taking part in suggesting and carrying out the migration policy, promoting cross-border and interterritorial cooperation, protecting Spaniards abroad and preparing, negotiating and processing the international treaties which Spain is part of. The Foreign Ministry is the nationwide department who oversees the foreign action of the Spanish regions and other administrations, as well as overseeing the foreign action of the constitutional bodies. In this sense, from the ministry depends the state foreign service, the set of individuals, bodies and institutions with competence in foreign matters. The Foreign Service is composed for more than 215 diplomatic missions around the world, including embassies, consulates, and other facilities, not including the 48 cooperation units of the AECID and the 87 Cervantes Institute centers. The MAEUEC is headed by the Foreign Minister, who is appointed by the King of Spain at request of the Prime Minister. After hearing the Council of Ministers, the Minister is assisted by 5 main officials: the Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs, the Secretary of State for the European Union, the Secretary of State for International Cooperation, the Secretary of State for Global Spain and the Under-Secretary of Foreign Affairs. The current Foreign Minister is Ms. Araha González Leyer, who is an independent. Diplomacy was born with the first nation states, being Spain one of the oldest nation states that continues to exist today. The first diplomatic relations of Spain as a unified entity began to be carried out with the Catholic monarchs, but strengthened by Charles I and Philip II because of the need to protect the interests of the empire. International relations are born with the Peace of Westphalia in 1648, which, in addition to supposing the end of the 30 Years' War, meant the reinforcement of the nation-state as a sovereign entity in its internal affairs and with sovereignty to maintain international relations. The ambassadors already existed, and little by little they were reinforcing their duties, placing themselves as essential pieces of foreign policy, a foreign policy controlled by the Crown. At the beginning of the reign of Philip V, in 1714, the king created the office of First Secretary of State, a kind of prime minister entrusted with foreign relations, and the Marquis of Grimaldo was appointed the first secretary. This is considered the start of the current Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The position of First Secretary of State remained unchanged until the first third of the 19th century. After the Napoleonic Wars, the international relations changed, and do so the foreign relations of Spain. In 1833 the office was modified and renamed Ministry of State, with Francisco Sar Bermúdez as minister. With this change, Spain was endowed with an analogous institution to which the rest of European nations had, in which 2 new bodies worked on: consular officials and the diplomats, who would eventually merge in 1928. It was precisely in 1928 that the Ministry of State merged with the office of the Prime Minister, returning to the times when the first Secretary of State was a king of premier with foreign affairs responsibilities. This just lasted 2 years because in 1930 the officers were split again. In spite of the continuous Spanish political instability, international relations in the ministry remained stable, suffering the biggest change in 1938 when it was renamed Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and the current headquarters are established in the Palace of Santa Cruz. A year later the Palace of Viana in Madrid was established as the official residence of the foreign minister, and in 1942, the diplomatic school was created. During the Spanish transition to democracy, the foreign ministry was a fundamental institution, since it was in charge of transmitting to the world the political change that Spanish society was living and promoting relations with Ibero-America and other priority regions for Spanish foreign policy. Other important role that the ministry assumed during this period was managing entry into the European Community. During the short period of 1979 to 1981, the responsibilities on foreign affairs were shared between the Foreign Ministry and the Ministry for Relations with the European Communities, and after 1981 the second merged into the first ministry as a Secretariat of State. In 1988, the Spanish Agency for Inter